You're listening to the Culture Junkie Podcast, where we go beyond the surface of pop culture.
I'm Keith.
And I'm Xandra. Together, we dive into the craft, process, and passion that drive today's creators. This is the Culture Junkie Podcast. Life moves fast and your insurance should too. With on-the-fly insurance, you can compare rates, customize your coverage, and get a quote in minutes. It's 100% online, 100% secure, and 100% Canadian. So whether you're on the go or planning ahead, protect what matters most with ease. Head to ontheflyinsurance.com and get protection made easy. Built for life on the fly. Links in the bio or in the show notes below. Okay, welcome everybody. Excited to have Barbara Todd Hager, the Canadian documentary writer, producer, and director with Métis and Cree ancestry, here today on the podcast to talk about her upcoming movie premiering at the Vic Film Festival, Leaving Beringia.
You got it.
So tell me more about this film that's coming out very soon. It's premiering for the first time, is it? Wow.
It's actually the world premiere.
Really?
Which is the biggest moment of a filmmaker's, I guess, life with their films is when the first time it screens. And then after that, it becomes like the Canadian premiere or the Mexican premiere. But the world premiere is pretty big because you finally finished you birthed your film and it's like in the world. Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Like, what do you want the people in the audience to receive from the film?
Well, this is I think it's my 6th feature documentary, but it's the first one that I'm actually in the documentary. So I'm a little apprehensive because I'm not usually in front of the camera. I'm usually behind the camera.
Mm-hmm.
But this story is about my search for my father's ancestry. So having Cree ancestry and having worked in museums a lot in my life and done other documentaries about archaeology and ancient history, I thought, well, I would just like to go and find out if Indigenous people, my ancestors, had their own thoughts and own beliefs about where our ancestors journeyed from, or even if they journeyed at all. So that was kind of the idea when I came up with the idea, and I presented it to TELUS Independent, Christina Willings at that. She's my executive at TELUS, and she just loved it, and it got greenlit, and the journey began.
Yeah, I bet. And how did pre-production look for that, like that? Because did you have to do some traveling, some location scouting?
Mm-hmm.
Did you do a combination of archaeological, behind the scenes, looking up documents? Was it a mix of the two?
It was kind of a mix. And my dream as a child was to be an archaeologist. I ended up being a journalist and then an arts administrator and then a filmmaker. But we did scout in Alberta, which is where I'm from Alberta. I'm from Edmonton and my family's from the prairies. So I wanted to begin the story near where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
So we did tour several locations in Alberta, including the oldest known inhabited location in southern Alberta, where Indigenous people hunted 13,400 years ago.
Wow.
And hunted horses and camels and mammoths.
Yeah.
Growing up, I had no idea that I lived in this, paleontology kind of world. And then we did a lot of research on the sites that we wanted to go to, and we chose eight archaeological sites. And we chose to visit the sites and the archaeologists that worked on them and the Indigenous knowledge keepers who lived near or whose territory those sites were in.
Wow, what was it like going and talking to the knowledge keepers?
Well, I think it was a bit of a dream for me to do that because, I worked at the Royal BC Museum for several years in the archaeology and anthropology department, and it just wasn't part of the playbook.
Mm-hmm.
For many decades for scientists and archaeologists to involve Indigenous people or their interpretation of the sites. Now, anthropologists, of course, are different because they usually work with communities and families and things. But I thought, well, this is an opportunity to hear another perspective on the origins of Indigenous people. So that was my dream. And honestly, the people that I met were above and beyond what I expected. There was so much passion and just honesty about where their community what they believe in and how the oral histories and the languages and the place names support those stories, that it was kind of exciting to
Mhm.
meet all those people.
How is it weaving in those stories into the narrative of the film?
Well, how I structured it was I decided to go on a journey. So I began in southern Alberta, where was near where I was raised, and we actually we cast a 12-year-old girl who is Cree and Métis to play me as a 12-year-old, because that's where the story really begins, is that awakening as a kid. Like, I knew I was Indigenous. I would always gravitate towards those stories as a kid, and we knew our ancestry and we knew our family and things. But to think that's where the idea of really started, of searching for my ancestors. So we began by casting a young girl, and so the beginning scene is in Drumheller, where we used to camp in the summer. So it was kind of like cool to go back home to one of my touchstones as a child. And then I started the journey by going to the sites in southern Alberta, Wally's Beach, and then to the Royal Alberta Museum, then to the Yukon, then to Nome, Alaska, where Beringia actually existed and is still known as a ancient land base. And then we traveled south and went to several sites in North America and ended up in Mexico, in Tulum. So
Really?
I even got to go see where Clovis tools were first discovered near Clovis, New Mexico. So it was like everything I ever wanted to do, I got to do.
Wow, that sounds like quite the journey, and the viewer gets to travel with you
Mhm.
in that entire and learn, I guess, everything that you're discovering as well while you're transported back into your own story. So weaving your story into the larger story of the land, I guess.
Yeah, the land and the history. And it was really cool to bring elders together or knowledge keepers with the archaeologist, because sometimes
Mhm.
they were like, wow, we've worked together for 30 years. So some archaeologists are very, very involved in Indigenous archaeology and support the combination of those two philosophies or two ways of looking at history. But some communities, they like never even talk to the archaeologist in their location. So I
Wow.
learned a lot about actually bringing those two groups together, actually sparked conversations that maybe have never been had before.
That's
So it's kind
cool.
of like, okay, here's a little catalyst for you guys to start talking.
Yeah, that's like a whole side, story to the entire documentary that might also warrant its own, discussion as well.
Exactly. I hope so. I hope the documentary, number one, dispels the myth that our ancestors have only been here 12,900 to 13,200 years ago, and they, came from Asia across the Bering Land Bridge and used Clovis tools. Like, there's bigger story than that. There's a deeper, longer. Humans have been in the Americas for at least 24,000 years. So, but this hardly well known. It's always like, oh, I thought you've only been here, a few thousand years or 10,000 years. So the documentary exposes a lot of new research and a lot of new crossovers between oral tradition and archaeological discoveries that actually support each other
Mhm.
through stories about megafauna or stories about volcanoes or floods. And these or ice on one side of the community and water on the other. Like, how could those stories be if they weren't from ancient times?
Hmm. So how long did you think that well, do you know that it took to film and put everything together?
We started shooting in the summer of 2023, and we shot up until last 2025. We went to Mexico and shot our scenes there. So it took about, I think we shot 20 days, something like that. And then, sometimes it's hard to connect with the people you want to interview, so it spreads out over a year and a half. And then we were in post, and we just delivered the master to tell us today.
Wow. Wow.
And then, of course, the film festival had the film festival version, like, much earlier, because the film festival programmers like things soon, sooner
Yeah.
than later. So, yeah, we're finished, and I feel good about it. I feel like sometimes you wanna go, "I wish I could change that, or I wish I would've said th," but this film, I actually feel like it's completed. Like, the story's there, and it's It's what I wanted it to be, so
Yeah,
and I had
so
a great crew. My crew was fantastic. It's not like films are not made by one person.
no, not at all. How did you end up choosing your crew, or did they somehow choose you?
Well, I bring a lot of my crew back from other past projects, so, like, Cliff Hokanson, who's a Métis camera guy and DOP, he worked on my previous film for Knowledge Network called Forbidden Music, and my office team was I've had them for years and many projects, Olivia Hurst and Kate Frobeen and Paula Raimondi, and I have researchers that come back, but a lot of times we get new camera guys and we get new, producers and stuff, but
Mhm.
yeah, so yeah, you find the people that you feel good with and you trust and they're on your same wavelength.
You're on your team that you end up using, I think, going forward, and it's nice when you can cycle new people in and, find some new talent and new points of view, and you were talking about your DOP a little bit before we started. How is it working with them all over the different locations?
Well, we take a team of about the crew is about 5 people, and we all got along, and we all, everybody understands the story that we're trying to tell. Everyone from, the camera team to your office team to your location people, you're all supporting the making of the same story. So, yeah, it wasn't like it was rugged, like, we didn't camp out or anything, but we did stay in some pretty small towns and some,
Yeah.
little
Yeah, we're
motels and
getting
stuff.
remote. It's hard to find equipment, like if something breaks
Yeah.
or, if you have your flow is interrupted, it can be a little dicey if you're halfway around the world.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we did go mostly to near communities where like, we've shot other documentaries in Peru and
Oh, nice.
Japan and New Zealand and Belize, and that's when you're like, "Okay, we can't take batteries down there, and we're out in the or we're in the jungle, or we're in the mountains, like, how do we get that?" But that's a whole 'nother
Yeah.
challenge is when you're in communities that aren't near film centers or, you know, um, places you can get your equipment or charge your batteries.
Yeah, fully. But I want to go back to your original wish to be an archaeologist.
Mhm.
And then you became a journalist. I feel like these two vocations would kind of play in really well to the storytelling of being a
Mm.
documentary filmmaker.
Well, one thing I realized because I did not follow my dream of being an archaeologist, my back is in better shape after all
I
these years because I know archaeologists have to do a lot of field work and they're like, bending over, scraping things out of the ground and stuff. But as a journalist, you can be curious about anything and can become an expert for a moment enough to write the story or to write the book or something. So, but I did specialize a lot in interviews and
Mm,
print interviews. Like nowadays, you guys do podcasts and you
yeah.
do videography, but back in the day, you had to interview people and then write things and
Uh-huh.
then have an editor go through them. And so, yes, but I think being a writer first actually helps you structure a documentary because you want your reader to follow the story in a way that they understand. And the same thing with a documentary. You don't want to
Mhm.
be, that's why we came up with this structure for Leaving Beringia, where we were on a journey and we
Mhm.
actually have maps that show where I'm going from place to place. So we had a really great team at Paizo 2 Media who did all of the maps and all of the CGI. And then you have to have music. You have to layer the music in, and all of the music is Indigenous composers.
Very nice.
So it's a really, big combined effort of story, music, video, interviews, locations. All those things have to come together, and then you get to post-production, and then you're like, "I gotta weave this into one, 90-minute story."
Do you think that the post-production when you got there, do you feel like the film changed at all in your conception
Mhm.
of it when you were able to see everything laid out in front of you and compile it? Or was your writing and your story very much set in stone
Mhm.
before you put it together?
Well, documentaries are never set in stone. They're always fluid. And even though we usually have to pitch to broadcasters and distributors with a treatment and a plan, it hardly ever goes that way.
Hmm.
But at least you have a blueprint that you're gonna follow, and then, things do change, but I think the biggest concern I had was, coming from a museum background and a First Nations, working with First Nations storytelling and communities, is how do I let each group that I'm representing not feel like I'm missing something or I'm being critical of one over the other? Because, like, the history is normally told by the conquerors, as we know, over time. And Indigenous people did not have a written history other than the Mayan culture. So we don't have these books that say, okay, this happened at this time. So you have to really trust the people you're interviewing, whether it's the science side or the Indigenous side, that they're telling their truth and they're basing it on their beliefs or whether it's tool technology or DNA on oral histories, place names, sometimes even traditional knowledge carries thousands of years of progression of that
Hmm.
community. So everyone has to be treated with respect, or you really don't get the story that you want. People will start feeling like I'm going to be misrepresented, you as a journalist.
Yeah.
So it's very much you're not telling the story, they're telling the story to you. And that's comes out in the final product. But the hardest part was writing the voiceover. And I think I rewrote it like 40 or 50 times. I was like, I just couldn't get my voice
Hmm.
and I had to narrate it. But at the very end, I finally went into the studio with David Parfit, who was my sound and music editor. And we sometimes rewrote stuff. I'd had the
Right.
whole script, I was recording it, it's like, "Oh, I don't think this doesn't feel right." "No problem, just re-record it." So in the end, I felt strongly that the narration was matching up with the story that I was trying to tell.
That's great. And as far as like bringing your team together so that they could help you bring the story to fruition, basically, how do you feel like did they lend not just their experience in the past, but perhaps did they add a little bit of their own story to the telling of this documentary?
Um, well, I did have a story team. So Sarah Robertson was our story editor, Ben Mulchinock and Paula Raimondi. So Ben's my son. He's a philosophy major at UBC. So
Wow.
he was my researcher. And the other, it was really helpful to have the four of us have like day-long story team. Like we developed a lot of the structure as a team. And we also looked at like what emotions am I trying to bring out? What factual things, what philosophical things. So we spent like I'd say probably 5 or 6 days in the story room, which is
Cool.
unusual for a documentary.
Yeah.
I wanted to get people to give me feedback because I didn't want it to be like this really, this is my story and this is how I'm going to tell it. And I'm not listening to anyone else. I think you have to be open minded in those, especially this is going to be a controversial film for sure.
Hmm.
There's going to be people saying Beringia did not exist and no way did we come over, land bridge. And then there'll be people saying, but the evidence is very strong that humans and all humans, not just Indigenous humans, we traveled and journeyed.
Hmm.
We followed herds, we followed food, we followed weather, we followed family, we followed a curiosity. It's like, oh, there's a mountain over there. Let's go check it out. So I think pure science doesn't consider the human motivation or feelings or ideas. And I wanted to have the Indigenous speakers in this film fill in those blanks. That science, oh, we found fossils, we found rocks, we found tools, we found a hearth. Okay, what were they cooking in that hearth? What were they, was there a big family? Did they have children? Like it's like half the story and the other half of the story came together. And it's still going to be controversial because a lot of Indigenous communities don't have a story of migration. They have a story of that they've always been there in this place that they live. So it's important to respect that. So I think that's kind of what I learned from this particular story is that history is not like a rock. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
pebbles and there's
Well,
big piles of them.
Yeah, and you're going over a huge part of time. This is not a short amount of time that you're talking about. It sounds like you're able to fit a lot of different stories within that. So if one community has stationary culture, perhaps they fit within that piece of time as well, and that's their story, which doesn't it would d and it doesn't take away from the other story that perhaps they were nomadic, you know? So,
Exactly. Yeah.
science is not immutable, science is movable as well, and I
Mhm.
think, delving into that as a archaeologist, a researcher, a journalist, and finding out the new discoveries that are coming and being able to communicate them to different cultures,
Mhm.
I think is a really big I think this is a vehicle, a documentary film, personally, I think that's a great vehicle to be able to communicate that, whether it's controversial or not.
Yes, I
But
agree
maybe
with
it should be controversial because it's challenging ideas.
Yes. Well, we all have different cultural backgrounds, and this story could be taking place anywhere in the world. It could be an Asian story, it could be an
True.
African story, it could be a European story, or, um, you know, uh, Arctic circumpolar people have their own history. And I think what I hope happens is that people open their minds and don't, and it's not just one way or the other way. Like I learned about Clovis tools and the Beringia, or the people crossing over from the Siberian side, like my whole childhood and high school and even into, college, that's what you're taught. And now
Yes.
we're seeing, well, if that's the case, why were people in New Mexico at White Sands 24,000 years ago walking around with giant sloths and mammoths? And why was there a girl found in the cenote who's at least 14,700 years old, which is Eve of Naharan, the story that we followed with the cave divers. So it's a big narrative.
Mhm.
And I just captured, like, this part of the narrative, so but it was it was some of the best sites. I wish I woulda had 16 locations to go to, but we had to select 8.
Well, maybe the next one. Who knows what the next, documentary is. I don't wanna say what's next because
Well, there already is a note. There's
that's
always the
always
next one.
whenever I finish a film, it's always like, "Okay, I can't well wait until it's done." And it's
Yes.
like and you just dropped it off today, so it's like,
Mhm.
can I celebrate today without asking, "What's next?"
Oh, I don't know, I already started shooting the next one, so
No way! What's the next one
well,
about then?
it's
What's
I'm
next?
gonna be vague about it because the authorities haven't, published an announcement, but it involves the discovery of an ancestor
Mhm.
in Mexico. And I spent several days with a group of scientists at a very remote mosquito-y jungle location, which I can't
Got it.
reveal today.
A secret location.
And it's basically following the scientific discovery of an ancestor from the beginning, like, not
Mhm.
later when it's already in the, being processed, or at the, having the DNA. It was, like, at the location. So, maybe
Really?
I did become an archaeologist for 1 week. I got to be
Sounds
there.
like it. I think that's part of being a filmmaker and a documentary filmmaker and a director is you get to step into all these roles briefly, even if it's for a second, but to help
Exactly.
communicate that.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, you're it's coming out world premiere at the Victoria Film Festival on the 10th of February, 2026 here. Are your crew is anybody gonna be there?
Yes. Yeah. So I got about at least 7 or 8 of the crew will be there. It's at 5 o'clock at the Vic Theater on February 10th. So maybe by the time people see this, it might be over. But don't worry, we're going to do a cross country theatrical run in May and June of this year. So we'll be bringing it to independent theaters. It's hard
Perfect.
to get into the big theaters, but we will be taking it across. And in the fall of 2026, I'm going to be doing a university tour and
Amazing.
going to archaeology departments and First Nations studies programs, and just talking about the experience, and also the discussion of human ancestry in the Americas. And what are all the different perspectives. So yeah, so it'll be around for
Mhm.
a while. These shows, like the series I did called 1491, it's still on APTN and it's still on Knowledge and it's still being seen in different countries around the world. And it was also about pre-contact Indigenous history. So I think there's a real interest in it worldwide, and it's kind of evergreen
Yeah.
topic.
Well, you have good storytelling, you have interest in history, how humanity moves and what drives humanity. So it just makes sense that people want to watch it and want to consume a little bit more of that. As far as going to the universities, which universities are you thinking of going to?
Well, right now, some of our people that we interviewed are from um, University of Victoria, British Columbia, Oregon State University, Western Washington, different universities that these archaeologists teach at or are affiliated with. So, of
Mhm.
course, there'll be an interest because their professors are in it or and then we'll do First Nations communities that we went to, which we always like to go back to the communities. And I'm not sure how this will play out, but we've been invited to do a National Park Service tour in the Southwest United States, and I'm just going to wait to see how things are down there
Fair
before.
enough. Fair enough.
But there's a real big interest in doing a parks and national parks tour, like New Mexico and Texas and Arizona, and that's where maybe that's the cradle of Indigenous history could be right there, based on the White Sands National Park discovery of the footprints that are 23,000 years old. So, I don't want to say where we're going to go next, but those are some of the plans.
Some of the plays, so I guess stay tuned. Keep an eye on your website at
Atimo.com. Yes.
gmomedia.com, and I will put that in the show notes below so people can take a look, keep abreast of what's going on, and maybe watch some stuff if they haven't seen anything that's come up in the past that you'd
Yeah,
like to
we've got
share.
a lot. I've done 5 TV series and 6 feature docs, and we do have a Vimeo channel that is used by a lot of educators and homeschooling parents and stuff like that. So
Perfect.
you'll find all that stuff on the website.
All right. Well, we'll share and share alike. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks, Sandra. That was fun.
If there's
Enjoyed.
anything else you wanna give a shout out to, feel free to
Mm.
shout her out.
Well, I mean, the Victoria Film Festival is my hometown, so I absolutely love that festival. So if anybody hears this before it comes on, come out and watch some films. There's like 90 features and 40 shorts and there's some like just every kind of film you can think of. And just support film festivals because a lot of filmmakers never get the theatrical runs. They never get the big
Mhm.
televisions, CBC or the channels that you think we all want to get on, but we don't get picked. But film festivals give you a chance to hear and see different stories from around the world. And it's a great inspiration and a good way of, I think, bringing people together with common goals of humanity and support and like good politics of people working together. And I think that's why filmmakers are here to stay. AI is not going to take over.
I agree, and being able to go and watch it in consort so that you can maybe discuss afterwards and see different perspectives because everybody sees, like, I think, a different thing on screen at the end of the day. Whether you're a filmmaker or a non-filmmaker, either way, you're absorbing the story, and I
Right.
think being able to go with a bunch of different people and seeing it from all sorts of different perspectives brings a lot more to the experience.
I agree. I'm like a big festival supporter and on a couple of board of directors of some different film festivals. So yes, my last request is like support your local film festival.
Alright, well, thank you so much again for coming on. I had a great time, and maybe in the future, we will circle back around and see
All
how
right.
you're doing.
Okay. Thanks, Sandra.
Alright.
Thank you.